This is awesome. This museum's epic. Oh, look, the Berlin Wall's down there. Hello and welcome to Second Civics. It's been 1 year since that little snippet happened, and now I'm making a video about it. In 1989, an event that would change the world occurred. Primus, the pioneering funk metal band, released their first album, Suck on This. Despite Primus's impact on the music industry and their fantabulous music, they're a very divisive band. That's partially due to their kind of avant-garde sound. They turn brother against brother and mother against son. Mother is a song by The Police off of Synchronicity. And by Pink Floyd off The Wall. Well, as it turns out, there was some synchronicity in 1989 involving Primus, and as it turns out, a big old wall. The fall of the Berlin Wall. Have you ever been in a conflict with someone? If you're a human being, the answer to that question is probably yes. Almost everyone, when they're in a conflict, feels like putting up a barrier around themselves. A metaphorical wall. The Berlin Wall is an actual wall from an actual conflict that existed. The conflict between the Soviet Union and Western capitalism. More of the issue of communism and capitalism. Following World War II, the Allies kind of cut Europe in half. The eastern part of Europe would fall under the sphere of influence of the Soviet Union. And the western part of Europe would fall under the sphere of influence of the capitalist nations of the United States, Great Britain, and France. One of the nations that was the most divided by this was the country of Germany. Germany is obviously pretty big in World War II. They were the Nazi regime. They conquered a bunch of Europe during World War II. So they split it in half to prevent Germany from getting too powerful, which would later on be an argument given in opposition of the fall of the Berlin Wall. But Germany was cut in two, and in order to lead Germany, they needed a capital. That capital ended up being the city of Berlin, currently the capital of Germany to this day. However, it was the capital of both West and East Germany, despite being entirely within the borders of East Germany. This made it a prime spot for defectors from the communist East German state, which was a lot less prosperous, to the West German state. It was extremely easy. So in, I think it was 1950-something, the Soviets began construction of a wall. A barrier, actually, at this point in time, just a small fence, but it grew up to be a wall to keep the people inside East Germany and outside of West Germany to prevent a concept called brain drain, where your country loses all of its smart people, because obviously they would defect. This brings us to the Berlin Wall. As I already mentioned, there was a fence dividing East Germany earlier on, but it was easy to jump and extremely easy to bypass other than that. But in August of 1961, the East Germans began construction of an actual wall. Remember, they were under the guidance and influence of the Soviet Union. They're what we call a Soviet satellite state. That wall is what we call the Berlin Wall, and it would stand as a symbol of social divide, separating families, cutting them in two, separating brother from brother, mother from son, and father from third cousin twice removed. Either way, it split a country and it split a world in half, and would remain that way for another 40-ish years. Actually, it's 39-ish. So the Berlin Wall was built to separate people. As I said before, it separated brother from brother, mother from son, and father from third cousin twice removed. But not everyone was totally opposed to the wall. For instance, England, specifically Margaret Thatcher, believed that a unified Germany would be too powerful in Europe and cause a third world war. I don't need to elaborate on why that's a bad thing. Germany had already started 2 world wars, and they might have started a third. The way of preventing this was actually what we call the euro now. that euro was part of a consolation between Germany and France and England in order to prevent them from becoming too economically strong. One of the earliest high-profile visits to the Berlin Wall, in opposition to that Berlin Wall, was a little guy named John F. Kennedy, where he gave his famous Ich bin ein Berliner, or I am a Berliner, speech.
Ich bin ein Berliner.
In that speech he said, "Freedom has many difficulties, and democracy is not perfect, but we have never had to put up a wall to keep our people in, to prevent them from leaving us." This showed Kennedy's disdain for the wall. Later on, people like Ronald Reagan would say the famous quote,
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall!
Speaking of Gorbachev, he was a huge player in the fall of the Berlin Wall. His policies were less isolationist and more libertarian than earlier Soviet leaders' policies, namely Stalin. Gorbachev wasn't as keen on sending people off to work camps. But as Gorbachev, throughout the 1980s, pushed these new policies of openness, the people in Eastern Europe grew more democratic, and with a taste of freedom in their mouths, began to rebel. You saw rebellions in Poland and Austria and Hungary throughout the 1980s, and this culminated in the main critical event in the Cold War's ending. What we're talking about today, the fall of the Berlin Wall. In 1989, on a quiet, normal day, a mistake led to one of the biggest barriers in history falling. The East German government said to its people, "You will now be able to apply for international travel without prerequisites." However, this was misinterpreted by many newscasters as free travel for everybody! Yeah! This made everyone take to the streets and start rioting, going crazy. They all wanted to see their families. They hadn't seen them for 3 decades. I mean, you've all been locked inside with coronavirus and maybe haven't seen your families. This was 10 times worse. They went to the wall with sledgehammers and shovels and started whacking it down. Like big, like pushing and pulling and crazy, crazy, crazy things. It was mayhem. And the soldiers could not do anything about it. They were completely outnumbered. In that moment, the Berlin Wall fell, marking the end of nearly 30 years, I was wrong, about 39 years, of social unrest. So what now? Why is the fall of the Berlin Wall important? Well, as it turns out, there are 2 main reasons. One is the political reason. It created dozens of new democracies and put nails in the coffin for dictatorships globally. It caused the modern capitalist world that we live in. It's probably the reason you buy stuff that's made in China, as well as the fall of communism globally led China to open up quite a bit more. The second is a more philosophical lesson. It shows that any wall, no matter how high, between people, can be torn down with enough effort and enough hope, as was said on that shirt with Barack Obama on it that I was wearing about 3 minutes ago.
Mrs. Obama, get down!
Go. Due to the monumental nature of the fall of the Berlin Wall, many testaments exist of it to this day, including the one in the museum that I showed you earlier in the video. Other pieces of it are still around the world, and actually just in Berlin. There are still like chunks of it in the middle of the road. And there's also a park where the no man's land was. Shortly after the fall of the Berlin Wall, several celebrities, including David Hasselhoff and Roger Waters, did stuff at the Berlin Wall to celebrate its collapse. In addition to that, the memory of the Berlin Wall lives on in the 5,000 defectors, not all of whom are alive right now, that defected across the border over the wall.
I'm out of here. I don't want to be in East Germany anymore.
These people's bravery is basically one of the reasons that the wall fell in the first place. Thank you for watching, guys. This has been Second Civics, and Friggity Frank Gallo is out.
One morning in June, some 20 years But freedom